The topic I worked on throughout the semester was plastic issues. I worked with a group of 3 people to begin with, and later on during the semester that narrowed down to 2 other people in my group. Together as a group, we created a concept map to create categories and topics surrounding plastic waste in order to figure out what our focuses should be. Some of these sections included recycling, environment, demographics, stakeholders, pain points and bottlenecks, social factors, consumer waste, cultural considerations, beliefs and attitudes, health issues, economy, government and legislation, pros and cons, corporate production waste, causes and consequences, locations. We created post-it notes on Miro from there just to gather knowledge that we already knew to help us figure out what we wanted to research together. So from there, we developed our research question. What do corporations understand to be constraints preventing them from eliminating microplastics from their products? We used ChatGPT to look up keywords to assist us with our research when we went to use the library databases, and some of these keywords include cost effectiveness of plastic packaging, consumer demand for plastic packaging, market competitiveness and plastic use, technical limitations of plastic alternatives, longevity and durability of plastic products, and so on. And so then we use the library databases to gather scholarly articles and peer-reviewed journals. When we began researching, we realized that our key aspect that became like a theme throughout the research we found was environmental impact and plastic pollution, different structural recycling challenges, single-use purposes, volume of plastic packaging waste, resource scarcity, microplastic contamination, and corporate responsibility. And some of the facts that we found is that plastic makes almost half of all waste globally, with food and beverage industry being a prominent propagator. And why does the food and beverage industry prefer plastic? Because it is food safe, it helps extend product shelf life, protective and durable, and it's inexpensive and highly accessible. Halfway through our dive-in the research for our research question, we actually revised our research question to make it more specific. So our revised research question is, what do American food and beverage corporations understand to be constraints preventing them from eliminating microplastics from their products? And when we researched the constraints, we found some of these factors include a lack of infrastructure in production countries, a lack of legislation, lack of recycling facilities, supply chain complexities, poor material performance, and cost considerations. We also researched tables and graphs to represent more numbers and demographics and the statistics for our research question. So this graph shows the plastic waste consumption in the U.S., and the percentages represent the share of a plastic category in total MSW generated in each region. And then this graph shows the total plastic waste landfilled on site in 2019. The circles on the map depict landfill locations in the United States, and the size of the circles corresponds to the amount of plastic waste disposed at the landfills. And then we answer the question, what is the impact of this issue? And this issue also has an impact on environmental pollution, marine pollution, harm to wildlife, health risks, and economic costs. And then we have more charts that shows the annual production of plastics worldwide from 1950 to 2022. And you could see it's a linear increase in the production. And then the second graph shows the plastic waste generation projections worldwide from 2019 to 2060 by application and million metric tons. And you can see this is also a linear increase. And then we found a very specific, interesting graph that's not particularly answering our research question, but it does show helpful data to support it. The most common items found during the International Coastal Ocean Cleanup in 2022. The largest one was cigarette butts, and then as you can see, the next 2 largest ones are both food and beverage industry plastic packaging. You can also see the mention of foam food containers, plastic food containers, paper cups and plates, and plastic straws and stirrers. So majority of the categories shown on this graph our food and beverage plastic packaging. After our initial research, we changed directions and within the topic of plastic issues, and our new research question became, what are the factors that are influencing college students' behaviors towards plastic waste management, and how do these behaviors vary across different demographic groups? And we chose this research questions because we wanted to go in a direction where we can gain a lot of data from students and faculty on campus, and we wanted to do interviews and take observations and also send out a survey and get more responses through that. And then we went on to do interviews. So my group members did one each, and I did two. I did an interview with a peer who goes to Thomas Jefferson University, and she's a student, as well as an interview with Damon Orzetti, who's a faculty member here and is also the head of the sustainability department. We each asked a set of 11 interview questions in our interviews, beginning with clarifying whether they're a student or faculty member, how much time they spend on campus, asking if they know any prior knowledge about plastic waste and the effect it has on the environment, and asking if they recycle and why they do or don't, asking what encourages them to be more sustainable with plastic, whether that be recycling or reusing, asking them to tell us about a time where you didn't put in an extra effort to recycle and why they may have felt discouraged. Also, whether they think their relationship with plastic shifts at all depending on where they are or who they're with. Also, asking if they think their behaviors towards plastic change based on what it is that they're actually throwing out. Asking for an example of a time where they witnessed an excess of plastic being thrown out on campus. And then the final question was asking them to share any final thoughts or concerns they have about behaviors towards plastic waste management. Prior to completing the affinity map, we gathered all of our interview responses and color-coded it and then transferred that to the affinity map. So we color-coded it by similar responses. So for pain points, how can people feel more empowered to recycle? Some of the responses included, some people just don't care, plastic can be inescapable, plastic is useful, plastic is good, and plastic is durable, and that's a good thing. It also is a bad thing. I think one thing that holds a lot of people back in terms of plastic use, holds back in other words, they use a lot of plastic but don't put it in the right spot, for example. For positive social factors, some of these responses include, I'm pretty solid in my beliefs, it doesn't matter who you are with, I don't let other people's attitudes affect me towards this. And some responses for background knowledge, how does prior knowledge to subject impact recycling habits? Some of these responses include, yeah, I've heard about it, plastic waste is bad for the environment, like it messes up the oceans and stuff. I'm aware that plastic waste is a significant environmental issue causing harm to wildlife, polluting oceans, and polluting the environment. And I know that plastic waste has a bad effect on the environment and we're trying to get rid of it. So overall, fairly knowledgeable as far as the interviews go, which was a surprise to me. My prediction was that not a lot of people would know about the harms of plastic. And as far as recycling values went, some of these responses were, I definitely do prefer to recycle. Of course, it's important. Yeah, recycling is good and all. So a lot of people did agree with recycling being important. And as you can see, as far as their efforts went, some of them said, I try to recycle when I remember. I try my best to have a sustainable relationship with plastic by trying to recycle every time I get the chance. I try to, not too often, but I definitely try to use more reusable products when I can. So they said recycling is important, but they don't recycle all the time, either because they forget or they don't have the access to it. And lastly, for motivation, what is encouraging recycling and sustainable behaviors concerning plastic? Damon, the faculty member I interviewed, mentions the social buy-in to it, which is like normalizing these behaviors, like using a Stanley cup, and how that's like popular now, so people just refill their water instead of using plastic water bottles. for a lot of the motivation is like for a whole social group to make sustainable changes, which also relates to convenience and accessibility. A quote from my friend, she said, "There's water everywhere, we can refill our water bottles." Kind of ties into that social buy-in example. Other quotes were, it's environmentally good, but also economically good. And also understanding how it all works and knowing it's better for the planet, just knowing you're making a difference. Another way we were able to analyze our responses from the interviews we conducted was by creating an empathy map. So I created an empathy map based on Damon Orzetti, the sustainability professor I interviewed. And so who are we empathizing with? Damon. What do they need to do? Use less plastic and be more sustainable. What do they see? A lot of plastic usage, waste, litter, and horrible methods of ridding plastic. What do they say? Plastic is useful but bad for the environment. What do they do? Make sure bottles get recycled, teach others about sustainability, influence others to make better sustainable choices. What do they hear? News about things like the Great Garbage Patch and other environmental news. What do they think and feel? Some pains are plastic is very useful and good in many ways. And then some gains is that trends and influence, like using Stanley cups for reusable water bottles, are good ways people are being more sustainable. And other thoughts and feelings included knowledge about knowing where plastic goes influences their thoughts and actions. After gathering a lot of qualitative data, we knew we had to begin to gather quantitative data, and so we created a Google Forms survey. We began by asking questions similar to the interview: how old they are, whether they're faculty or students, if they live on or off campus, how much time they spend on campus, how many meals they eat here, if they use throwaway plastic items on campus, such as plates, cups, straws, utensils, etc. Do they recycle? Why, for yes or no. How often they recycle at home. And we asked them to rate the accessibility to proper recycling systems where they live or at home. And then we asked the same two questions, but on campus, to see if we could show a difference between accessibility to recycling systems, whether that be better or worse. And then we asked them how likely they would place the following items in the recycling bin, just to show how much knowledge they have about proper recycling rules. We asked how many items they think they throw out in the garbage on a weekly basis, just as an overall. And then we asked how frequently they use certain plastic items, straws, bags, utensils. And then we asked them to rate their interest in the topic of sustainability. And following that, we asked how open they are to implementing more sustainable alternatives in their everyday life. We asked them to rate their interest in learning about what plastic waste does to the environment, and rate their level of awareness on the issues surrounding plastic usage and waste. And then we straight up asked them if they are aware of how to properly recycle plastic items, and then gave an example of a specific rule not a lot of people know about. They wish they were taught how to recycle properly in school. And we asked them if they believe that TJUs should implement stricter rules or regulations to reduce plastic waste on campus. And again, we asked them to share any final thoughts they have about plastic waste management or any other final thoughts overall. We received 19 responses to the survey. A little bit over half live off campus. Most of the people that took the survey are students. Some are faculty. Majority, about almost 90%, are in between 18 to 24 years old. Almost 3/4 of the people that took it spend a lot of time on campus, about 47 days a week. Just a little bit less than half of the people eat meals on campus most days of the week. Nearly the other half barely eats meals on campus. 94% use throwaway plastic items when they eat on campus, like the plates, cups, straws, utensils, etc. Almost 90% said they recycle, and some of these reasons included that there's too much waste in the world, better try to make it less, because it helps society, for the environment, why not, which is a good answer, to do their part to keep the environment clean. Some of the people that said no said that there's no opportunity to recycle on campus, and there's not enough trash cans, We got a very mixed response for how often do people recycle when they're at home. 42% said always, 31% said most of the time, and 10% said sometimes, and about 10.5% said very rarely, 5.3% said never. And then 10% rated their accessibility to proper recycling at home a 1, 2, or 3. 37% rated their accessibility to proper recycling systems. Out of 4 being fairly good, and then 32% rated it a 5, being very good. This had a major contrast with the following question, which is the same ones, but whether they recycle on campus and rate their accessibility to proper recycling systems on campus. So almost 50% said most of the time. No one said always on campus. And then a larger number this time said sometimes, which is 26.3%. There was also larger numbers saying very, very rarely or never. And more people voted it a 1 and 2 versus 3, 4, and 5. How likely are people to place the following items in the proper recycling bin? And you could see some people did say styrofoam. Most of them said not likely at all for styrofoam, but there were a few people that did say styrofoam, and styrofoam cannot be recycled. So that goes to show that people don't really know much about recycling rules. How many plastic items do you think you throw out in the garbage on a weekly basis? Most of the people said a lot. About 42% said a few things, but I recycle as much as possible. How frequently do people use these plastic items? For very frequently, people said utensils and other things like cups, plastic wrap, etc. Sometimes people use bags a lot, plastic bags, or packaging as well. A little over 50% of the people said that they are interested in the topic of sustainability, saying that they rate it out of 4, their level of interest. About 31% said they would rate their level of interest at a 5, which is higher than I would think. When it comes to implementing more sustainable alternatives to plastic, people said they are willing to implement things. 31% saying that they're fairly willing to implement and rating it at a 4. Nearly 50% said they are very willing to implement alternatives, rating it at a 5. And following that, about almost 50% of the people rated their level of interest at a 4 when it came to learning about what plastic does to the environment, which again was higher than I thought. And then when it came to their level of awareness on the issues surrounding plastic usage and waste, they also rated it a 4. And this was about 58% of the people taking the survey. So they think they're fairly aware. Almost 74% said that they know some rules about properly recycling plastic items. Shockingly, a whole 21% said that they are aware of all recycling rules, which is a good shock. Almost 95% said that they wish they were taught how to properly recycle in school. Every single person that took the survey said that they believe that TJU should implement stricter rules and regulations to recycle plastic waste on campus. Some people shared their ideas that they have for what the school can do to better improve plastic waste management on campus. Some of these ideas include actually recycle things that are fit in recycling bins instead of throwing them away. Have recycling bins in dorms and hallways. A recycling bin for one, especially in Canbar. Having clear instructions on or near the recycling and garbage bins, making sure they relate specifically to Philadelphia's rules. Don't line recycling bins with plastic bags. More recycling bins. Use reusable plates, forks, cups instead of plastic. Not to use plastic utensils at all. Actually, 2 people said to use reusable silverware. Reinforce the actual dishes and silverware in the dining halls and making sure recycling bins are more frequent and obvious. After analyzing the survey, we developed a research proposal for future research. And the scenario my teacher gave me is that you are a member of Philadelphia City Council and want to better understand how new regulations for food packaging might be implemented. So we said our research question could be, how do other cities or regions with similar regulatory frameworks frameworks successfully implement and enforce regulations on food packaging. Our hypothesis would be the level of affordability varies with different businesses and may be a large obstacle in implementing new regulations for food packaging. And then our research design would include methods cross-sectional and both qualitative and quantitative. Additional research methods would include observations, because that could be a useful strategy. An example would be observing customers' behaviors with handling the food packaging in the places where it is implemented versus not implemented yet. As far as data collection goes, research strategies such as action and archival can be used as methods of data collection. Interviews with business owners that are implementing the new regulations or have implemented them should result in great qualitative data. For our main population, this would include business owners and customers in regions where the new regulations for food packaging have been implemented successfully. For the procedure for analysis, we said group similar results or responses that influence the successful application of the new regulations. And the anticipated research output would be what factors lead to success in enforcing the rules on food packaging. Some constraints and limitations that might happen is that business owners may not want to do interviews or get involved, so some hesitation there could be a constraint, and there may not be enough data to collect to clarify what the tactics the cities and regions may use to enforce the new rules successfully. Ethical considerations may be assessing whether research subjects could be harmed, having their safety threatened, or be in a place in an awkward physical or social situation. And then a rough timeline could include a week of identifying relevant sources, a week of research designs, and then 1 week for data collection, 1 week for data analysis, and 2 weeks to summarize all into one and complete. All right, that was my project. Thank you.